attorney, MSNBC legal analyst. Welcome back. Joyce, the trickle or drip of some information or sometimes recycled information from DOJ seems to be raising more questions. They want to claim they're releasing stuff, but the big stuff they haven't released yet, and what they have released looks fairly stale. What does that tell you about sort of where they're at with a president who once claimed there would be transparency in this case?
Well, and that's exactly the issue here, Ari. DOJ was under no obligation to release its case files. But Donald Trump, the president, the head of the executive branch, their boss, said that there would be transparency. And so the fact that they've backtracked, I think, raises a lot of legitimate suspicions and concerns about what might be in that evidentiary file if it were released. So far, we've seen two dodges. We've seen this ridiculous end run, this attempt to get the courts to release grand jury material, which failed. And in the process of that, we learned that the only thing that was involved there was two summary witnesses testifying. So nothing new there. And then we have this release, this dump of information vouched for by Representative Comer, which turns out to be nothing new. And so at some point, you know, you don't have to be a former federal prosecutor to have your little ears pick up and wonder what it is that they're trying to keep from the American people.
Mm-hmm. And jailhouse statements, be they issued in this unusual interview format, or what sometimes happens, as you know, in cases where there's things that are captured that an inmate says to another inmate or in a context, they don't have automatically high credibility. We're talking about convicts. Sometimes we're talking about people who are trying to barter or trade information, or continue to clear their own name for whatever their own personal reasons. And so when Maxwell went on and on about how nothing bad ever happened, I played one part, I'm about to play you another, I'm wondering what it tells you about her credibility, because the administration wanted to release this to say, look, here's a character witness for Donald Trump, in a sense. And that's so bizarre because a convicted sex trafficker is a terrible character witness. Here she was. Take a listen.
I saw him with lots of masseuses. I never saw a single masseuse ever look unhappy or not come back or whatever. So based on my observation, I don't think that if you are being raped, as now he's like this prolific, I just can't imagine why you would return.
It's not what you observed at the time.
Not what I observed at the time, no.
So Blanche sort of gives her this open door, and she talks about how whatever the ring of activities, including these so-called masseuses, were happening, Epstein never did anything in her observation that caused anyone to be concerned. I'll let you have the easy job of analyzing and fact-checking this. I'll just say it sounds ludicrous because we know these people were concerned because we have their testimony. Some of them are going to be speaking out next week. We know they were concerned after their interactions with the now deceased defendant Epstein.
It's really hard to imagine a less credible witness. The only thing that matters here isn't my assessment of Maxwell or your assessment. It's the jury's assessment. They heard all of the evidence. They heard her defense. They found her guilty. A unanimous jury of her peers convicted her. Look, she's sitting in federal prison. We all understand the game. Her case is still on appeal. She has hope, perhaps, that her conviction will be turned and she might be able to get her life back. It seems very unlikely to me, having studied the briefs, that she has anything there. But we understand what the game is. And I think your point here is so important. These victims who are willing to come forward, it's not easy. And it's especially difficult in the current context where someone like Donald Trump sits in the White House. And we now live in a world that treats women very differently than the world treated women even several years ago. So these victims are engaging in an act of bravery, trying to make sure that the truth is what shines through all of this. The fact that the Justice Department released this.
A lot of Trump allies and Republicans said, look, the Epstein thing will eventually die down, then it's late summer, and by the time you come back from congressional recess and Labor Day, people will have moved on. Well, it looks like that's not the case, partly because Donald Trump has extended this conflict with unusual moves and strange statements, and partly because Republicans in Congress at least want to pretend or say they're demanding information, whether or not they actually are doing so. And that's why we have news like this. Congress will question the former Trump Labor Secretary, Alex Acosta, who we told you about in our timeline. He was the federal prosecutor that cut that secret deal. You see the probe starts there, I showed you, and then under a Republican administration, it quickly went from indictment to a secret deal with a sweetheart, 1 year in prison. And as we reported, and Miami Herald has tracked this from the very beginning, they cut out even the victims from learning about the details of that suspicious deal. Well, now, finally, Congress is going to at least summon this individual and question him, Mr. Acosta. Remember, we also had this interview released late last week with Maxwell claiming that, well, whatever she did and saw, she's a convicted sex trafficker, she never saw any problems from Trump.
Did you ever hear Mr. Epstein or anybody say that President Trump had done anything inappropriate with masseuses or with anybody in your world?
Absolutely never. In any context.
Did you ever observe President Trump receive a massage?
Never.
You don't have to be a legal expert to wonder what the heck is going on there, where a sitting member of the government that prosecuted her as both a sex trafficker and a liar, winning those convictions, is now saying, oh, okay, never, 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 as if she is credible. The person who was not a party to that interview is the effective prosecutor who won Maxwell's conviction, Ms. Comey, who was recently ousted by the Trump administration. The interview itself was unusual, but if you ever were going to interview a convict for any reason and you had the prosecutor around who knows the case better than anyone and won it, well, you might have them involved. That was, of course, suspicious. Then there was the discussion of the 50th birthday letter that Trump allegedly sent to Epstein. We showed you that as well in our reporting. The Wall Street Journal first broke that story. We should note Trump both denies it and is suing over it. Here's the exchange.
Do you remember one way or the other whether President Trump submitted a letter for his 50th birthday?
I do not remember.
And the article that references the letter talks about like either a picture of a naked woman or something like that. Do you have any recollection of that?
I do not.
That question was odd in the sense of, does the DOJ have a reason to think that she was involved in the birthday mail? But I don't remember is not, it didn't happen. The letter is at the center, of course, of another subpoena because, as I told you, the news continues. Here's the AP covering how even congressional Republicans say if there is such a birthday book, they want it, and they're using their powers under law to get it if the Epstein estate has it. As for the infamous lists, remember, we showed you here, Trump vows declassification, and then his AG claims that she had the client list, then took it back. Pam Bondi, the sitting attorney general, clearly saying something false. As for Maxwell, well, she undercuts the Bondi claim that it existed, saying there is no such thing.
So, there's been a lot of conversations about whether Mr. Epstein maintained like a list of people, like a book of famous people that he knew, it's called a black book or a client list or a list. Did you know of the existence of any such list?
There is no list. We'll start with that. The genesis of that story I can actually trace for you from its absolute inception, if that is what you're interested in.
Again, there is a big difference if you're getting accurate testimony from someone saying they didn't see the list or weren't involved with the list to the sweeping claim there is no list. We don't know if there's a list. We know the Attorney General claimed there was. This has been a matter of great dispute. But legally, when you're doing this kind of investigation, if a defendant, now deceased, had some secret incriminating list, it's entirely possible that other people around him who knew about some bad things didn't know about that. So, while all of her statements as a convicted sex trafficker seeking preferential treatment are suspect, her sweeping claim that there is no list is a reminder that she seems to be doing a lot more than she can accurately say, which is why this isn't very valid testimony in any legal sense, a point that other investigators and congressional Democrats have made.
And Maxwell goes into this interview undoubtedly told by her attorney, unless you completely exonerate the president, you're going to spend most of the rest of your life in prison. She wants a pardon. She says exactly what her lawyers tell her. is going to be necessary to get a pardon. It all stinks to high heaven.
In that sense, while this may be a charade, it is one with implications. One of the victims' rights attorneys, who represents over 20 Epstein survivors, says many view the encounter that we just played you the audio from resembles a carefully scripted and choreographed dance rather than a, quote, interrogation of a convicted felon and accused perjurer. Barry Levine wrote The Spider, detailing the criminal web of Epstein and Maxwell. He's been nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. He takes no prisoners and doesn't do conspiracy theories, just does reporting. Imagine that. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Let's start with Maxwell, and eventually I want to turn to the unusual death of Epstein in prison, which you've covered. But what do you hear in these tapes? I pointed out legally the limits of this kind of testimony or statement. Certainly, its credibility. But having worked on this for so long, what do you hear in the new tape?
Well, in her interview, I mean, I don't even really regard it as an interview. To me, it came across as more of an infomercial.
What's really happening here is that Maxwell has Trump because he doesn't want to actually release the evidence. Look, Maxwell's testimony is important. It matters. But one, there are credibility issues because, as many have said, including myself, but I'm not the only one, she has been charged with perjury. Now, she was never convicted, but the charges were only set aside because they got her on these massive ones that she's currently in prison for. And so generally when someone perjures themselves, but you convict them on like a 30-year type prison sentence, 20-year type prison sentence, they're in for life type sentence, you generally don't go and then, do the whole perjury trial. It's seen as kind of a waste of legal resources, right? And that's a matter of opinion, but it's often what happens. But a lot of people suggest she would have been convicted on those grounds if the trial went to completion, or she would have pled out on them. But she still has some value here as one of the queen pins of this organization, and the other one is gone, so she does have certain say. And Donald could mitigate her if he wanted by releasing all the info, but it seems like they don't want to, and the info they've released is largely just rehashed, and they're not actually putting out the real new info that they promised their own voters back in the fall of 2024. And so because he doesn't want to release that, because he will be listed, the only person that has any leverage here is Maxwell herself, which means that she can always drop a bomb on Trump. Right now, seems like she's with him, but that could change at any second for any reason. And Donald, that means the world's most powerful man. Think of the vectors for how this could be used for blackmail or whatnot. The world's most powerful man, his reputation is dependent entirely on a convicted monster who wants a pardon and may have already been promised one.